Palworld, the game people like to call just Pokemon with guns, has taken over the world in a way that probably no one ever saw coming, leading to what is one of the most fascinating discourses in the game industry I've ever seen. On one side, you have accusations from various parties claiming Palworld has either used AI art to make the pals or even straight up stole meshes and altered them from other Pokemon games. Then on the other side, you have this rapidly growing fan base who loves Palworld, claiming these accusations are being fabricated or made in bad faith, that people are just jealous of the success by this small studio that somehow found a magic formula for success with a game that mashes various styles together in this chimera-like game. Then at the top of this ongoing battle and debates, you have Nintendo, who actually had to step in and make a statement because of the endless messages they are getting on the matter. Now, this summary in no way covers everything that has happened, but I really wanted to highlight it really quick because there is a moral gray area in the game industry right now about what is the line of taking inspiration to just straight up copying what another studio does, and I'm not here to paint that line because at the end of the day, I don't have the legal understanding to say whether the Palworld devs have done something illegal or not, and I'm not going to tell you what side you should be on. But what I will say is the only ones who can decide what's right or wrong in Palworld's case is Nintendo. And it's important to understand that no random arguing across the internet, whether on Twitter or anywhere else, is going to change that. Now, with that said, I'm ready to talk about my experience with Palworld after 70 hours of grinding, defeating all 5 leaders, base building, and catching all the legendaries. Is the game actually good, or is it massively overrated? Well, this is an interesting question when you look at all aspects of the game, because Palworld at a fundamental level is a survival game, which is a genre I strongly dislike, or at least I thought I did, because thanks to the pals that work, fight, and live alongside the player, Palworld makes the survival side of the game really feel like a team experience even when playing solo. But how does the gameplay loop exactly work with all of this? Well, basically after waking up on this mysterious island as an outsider, you move out into the world collecting basic resources. As you build up your supplies, you get your first bench built, and you finally craft your first pal sphere, which is used to, of course, capture pals. Then from there, you slowly start building up a base alongside them as you gather even better resources and capturing more pals, allowing you greater access to more tools, weapons, and ways to traverse the lands alongside them. And what I love most about this is how expressive the pals are while doing all of this. When they help the player build, they are happy. When they get sick, they look miserable. When they're sleeping, they look peaceful. And this range of emotions portrayed in the animations is one of the best details in the game, which is why it sucks some of the designs fly a little too close to the sun, because the devs clearly put some serious effort into creating the animations for the various pals, which some of them even getting some unique attack moves. Also based on the pal's design or type of pal they are, so if they are a water type or a fire type, the kind of work they can do around the base varies, which is cool because it brings in this kind of resource managing aspect where you're trying to optimize what pals you need working at your base while you're out adventuring. That way you're always building to that next base level. Which, speaking of base levels, over time you're going to be able to level up your base as you meet certain requirements, allowing you to have even more pals working at your base. But the game doesn't just allow you to dump the pals into the base and go on with your life. I mean, I guess you can do that if you really want to, but they will suffer from broken bones to sleep deprivation, so you have to leave room to accommodate them. From beds to food and even a hot spring, your pals need to be taken care of, unless you want to be crafting medicine all the time to heal them. But this leads to an interesting building dynamic with the bases, because you need to optimize the room you have to accommodate all of this. Though I will say a nice thing is, as you level up your base, you will get access to additional bases you can build, which also act as fast travel points. So if you wanted to make it so one base is focused on mining, while another is focused on farming and gathering wood, you can do that. Also, sometimes your bases will get attacked, which has a tower defense feel to it with your pals, though these really never end up being an actual threat most of the time. So with all this base building talk and working alongside pals, I'm probably making it sound like a pretty flawless experience. Well, it's not. It's a total nightmare at most times. Since this is an early access game, the issues are endless at your bases. Pals' pathing will break. They will fall into the ground, get stuck in trees, which leads to them starving or unable to sleep. So now they are sick or have some other kind of issues like an ulcer. They don't like to work on the stuff you need them to. They will constantly start one task and just leave it to mess with another, which is annoying. Like, there's a lot of work that needs to be done here. We need to be able to assign tasks to pals. Like, if they can chop trees, build weapons, and transport materials, let me toggle 2 of these off so they only focus on making me weapons. They need better AI pathing so they're not just stuck in place unable to figure out how to walk around a wall and so on. Also, the base building can be very annoying, like I couldn't even use slanted roofs at all because I had to do an extreme workaround to get them to work, so I just gave up and made flat roofs for everything. So, safe to say, lots of work needs to be done there, which is kind of a testament to the base building loop of the game, that despite all these flaws, it's still immensely fun. But what about another aspect of the game, battling and catching pals? Well, it's also full of issues and some design choices I'm not a fan of. Now, as you're traveling around the world of Palworld, you will find various tasks that will help further you and your team of pals' progression, since the pals you carry with you will earn XP and level up alongside you, and you earn this XP from gathering resources, catching, and defeating wild pals. Now, fighting is pretty straightforward. You aim at the pal you want to fight, and your pal will engage with it when you throw them out. Or if you're under attack, just throw them out and they will start fighting. Then of course, you have various weapons from spears, crossbows, and guns you can use alongside them. Now, the biggest issue with fighting pals is the fact your pals will often just stop attacking or just kind of bug out, which really sucks. Definitely against something like the tower leaders you have to fight. You have a 10-minute time limit against them, which against the hardest tower leaders, you don't have much room for error and need to be pumping out DPS. I don't know how many times against the final tower leader I failed just because my pals wouldn't attack. Plus, the damn pillars in the room will constantly cause your pals and the boss to get stuck on them. It's so damn frustrating, which sucks because there are some really cool systems at play for battles. You're able to ride your pal and fight alongside them, which is awesome. They heal while inside of your pal sphere, so you can constantly be rotating pals to have them heal during battles. Not to mention, this is a great way to help them dodge attacks at the last second. Also, you can teach your pals new moves by feeding them fruit, but the kicker is that any pal can basically learn any move regardless of the type, which adds an interesting dynamic to battles. If they could just iron out this stuff, you really could have a fun combat system that could shine if done right, not just in PvE, but in a PvP setting as well, though I'm sure outside of creating a turn-based combat system could be a nightmare to balance. With that said though, catching pals, or humans, can also be a frustrating experience, and it really shows just how much of the game relies on the building and resource gathering mechanic. What I mean by this is your ability to catch stronger pals is tied to your base progression, since stronger pals require stronger spheres to catch, which outside of finding them laying around the world, they need to be crafted, which I'm not a big fan of, just for the simple aspect I should be able to use any sphere to catch any pal. I don't think I should be just straight up denied a chance to catch a pal just because my sphere doesn't reach a requirement. Even if it's just a 0.01% chance, you should at least get that chance. And yes, this was born from me being salty for coming across a lucky Digtours, which is basically the shiny equivalent of a Pokemon, and not being able to capture him as my balls just bounce off of all over his body. He's one of my favorite pal designs, and it absolutely sucked the fun I was having right out of my soul for not even being allowed the chance to catch him using one of the stronger sphere types. That's wild to me, so that's something I would really like to see changed. Now, moving on from there, what exactly is there to do in this world outside of catching pals, collecting resources, and base building? Well, there's a few things. You have the tower leaders, who I mentioned earlier, to battle. These will definitely test you and your team composition to its limit. Not to mention, you yourself as a player needs to be progressing your base so you can have the best available weapons or armor so you're not worthless alongside your pals. Now, the first tower leader, Zoe, isn't bad, but the difficulty ramps up like crazy with each one, so anyone looking for a challenge should find it with them. Also, there are legendary pals to catch which are just as difficult as the tower bosses, which left me very satisfied after catching them. Not to mention the music playing as you fight them actually kind of goes hard. Now, you also have dungeons you battle through that give you chances at catching a boss type pal that's basically just a larger version of a normal pal. These dungeons also give you useful resources like tentacle manuals that can give you more points that are used to unlock various items. I should also note leveling up also gives you these points. You can also find fast travel points, overworld bosses, limp monk statues, which can be used to improve your catching rate of pals. There are treasure chests, small settlements with NPCs, illegal pal traders, and so on. The world is full of stuff to do, but at the same time often feels lifeless. There's a lot of copy-pasted stuff that makes it so areas that should feel unique don't. Like in the desert, you have the statue of Anubis with the pal that looks like him by it. This makes sense and is a cool detail, but then you also have the same statue over by the volcano, so now that area no longer really feels unique. Then you got random terrain glitches that happen everywhere you go with aggressive pop-ins as well. These little details of the world is what they need to tweak to make it feel more interesting to explore, and this applies to other stuff as well. Tower, boss, battle, arenas should be themed to make them stand out more. Dungeons, while changing themes based on biomes, should have more varied layouts and so on. The little details can sometimes make an okay world into a great world, and this is something they will definitely need to tackle at some point. First things first though, there are a set number of problems they need to tackle in order. They need to fix the PAL AI, animations, and server stability. Having PALs malfunction is not good. Lagging around in co-op is also not good considering how much of a blast co-op is, and is probably where the game is at its best. So these need to be addressed first, though I will say in terms of performance, the game ran amazing for me playing solo. I maybe had 5 crashes in 70 hours. Anyways, then after that, they need to work on adding in content. After beating the bosses and catching legendaries, there is basically nothing to do, outside of unlocking everything, min-maxing pals through breeding, and perfecting your enslaving of everything on the island as a evil, tyrannical overlord. As great as the game's gameplay loop is, it doesn't change whatsoever from start to finish. That can only carry a game so far, no matter how good it is. So having endgame content like raids or PvP is a much, which they did put out a roadmap mentioning these are all things they plan to work on. But on top of that, I would really like to see some actual story moments in the game as well, even though I know it's uncommon in survival games, because you can actually find memos around the island from various characters, including the tower leaders, that expands on the lore and adds context to the world and motives of these people, which I found myself actually enjoying and could see it being very interesting if done right. Also, not having to recreate a character or starting over at the lowest level every time you join a new server would also be nice. With all that said though, is Palworld overrated? Well, after 70 hours, I can definitely say no. This isn't just a copy-pasted game, and calling it just Pokemon with guns is a massive disservice to it. Some impressive work went into the systems of the game that truly make it engaging regardless of how you play. Not to mention the game actually has various settings that can be altered to make the experience easier or harder if you so choose. Now, is Palworld some Game of the Year material? Absolutely not. It's an early access game with various bugs and issues that strongly need addressed, and no amount of sales is going to change that. But it does show an idea is sometimes greater than a budget, and fun should always come first when creating a game before anything else. So the real question that really should be asked is, does Palworld have staying power? If everything turns out fine with Nintendo and all the basic issues with the game are addressed, I would say most definitely, though I do think it would be wise for Pocket Pair to make sure their future designs of Pal monsters are a little more unique, which I know they could do since some of their designs are actually really interesting. Not to mention that at some point down the road, they need a more cohesive art style with the world, since sometimes everything can feel not very cohesive between the player models, map, and Pal monsters. Outside of that, I enjoyed my time with Palworld. It's an experience I won't forget, and it's actually made me want to go back to play the last few Pokemon games and try out some new survival games, which is what I love about video games. Sometimes one game can set you down a path of trying a bunch of new experiences related to a genre you wouldn't normally play. Anyway, thanks for watching everyone.